I'm going to go ahead and get started. So welcome everybody to a meet and greet with the Research Data Alliance for the participants of the Improving Global Agricultural Data Community of Practice. I'm going to say a few words at the beginning about IGAD for the benefit of those who are new to us. The Improving Global Agricultural Data is actually has been around for quite some time. And so these are some photographs from some of our older meetings, but we've had a lot of recent activity. We've had a cross-fertilization workshop as part of the anniversary, the 20th anniversary of the Research Data Alliance. We have formed a liaisons council with our networks of collaborators around the world, and they are helping us to extend the network beyond just the RDA members, but to some of our related networks. We have funding under the World Fair project to do work on fair use cases for agricultural related pollinator data standards. That's being led by Deborah Drucker, one of our co-chairs. And we recently in June held an annual meeting at which we organized 5 or 6 sessions with presentations from our community. And all of this is available online. This is an overview of who we are. We have 5 co-chairs, of whom myself and Valeria are here on today's call. We became a community of practice only recently, and the idea is to provide a forum for sharing our experiences and providing visibility for the work that we all do in food and agricultural data. We are organized under the Research Data Alliance, and part of today's goal is to better connect our membership to RDA. We've had a number of working groups that have produced recommendations, but we don't have any active working groups right now. So we're always on the lookout for new working groups, but the goal of today's meeting is to respond to some polling results of our membership when we asked, what groups are you a part of? Or what groups would you like to be what groups are you interested in and would like to know more about? And so I extended an invitation to a number of other interest groups, working groups within RDA, and these are the ones who responded. And so today we'll be hearing about the Data Usage Metrics Working Group and a little bit about physical samples and collections. And I don't think that Shelley Stahl was able to join us this morning, so we'll have to catch up with her later. So now I would like to turn it over to Iratza Puebla and Ian Bruno to talk about the Data Usage Working Group.
Thank you very much, Cynthia. And it's me who's going to kick off. I'm Ian Bruno. I'm Director of Data Initiatives at the Cambridge Crystallographic Data Centre. So we deal in crystal structures, molecules, and things like that. And I'll let Iratza introduce herself when she talks later on. So we're the current co-chairs of this working group, which is actually, it says established. I think it should have changed that to in maintenance mode. It was originally, I think the case statement, date on the case statement was about 2018 when that was approved. And we published our recommendations that came out of that process in, I think it was 2021. One of those recommendations was that we should continue a group of this nature to sort of continue a discussion around data usage metrics. And I'll say a little bit more about what we mean by those, why we think they're important as we go through this presentation. So the premise of the group was that from metrics that can reliably reflect the impact of research data as a first-class object. And then the question is, how do you do that? And how do you do that in a meaningful way? And so what the group was kind of focusing on was developing ways of reporting data usage and metrics that are reliable and useful. In terms of what's next, it is really talking about the work that we've done and keeping the conversation alive, as I said. So what I want to go on to is just outline the recommendations that we came up with on the next slide. So the first thing that's said in the recommendations is that this is a topic of interest to the community. And just to clarify here, really what we're focusing on is how you can meaningfully report views and downloads of a data set that might be present in a data repository. One of the things that we did as part of our activities was to survey a whole range of different types of repositories. And it was clear from that that people were interested in this topic. But what it was also clear was that not a lot of organizations or repositories had chosen to prioritize implementing this. And that led to discussions around some of the activation barriers that there might be to actually implementing something. Now, in parallel to the lifetime of this group, there were various initiatives ongoing that were sort of coming up with guidelines and mechanisms that would help with the implementation of data usage metrics by repositories. One was sort of development of an aspect of the counter code of practice for reporting views and downloads. I think some of you may be familiar with the counter code of practice in terms of counting downloads of journal articles. If you're not, then Araksha will say a little bit more about what that is later on. There was a project running alongside this called Make Data Count, and that had come out with various recommendations for what was needed and practices associated with implementing this code of practice. And then DataCite have been working on a usage tracker that really does provide a way for people to sort of have a concrete implementation of something that could be meaningful. Araksha will elaborate on each of these later on. The other main outcome, I would say, of the sort of groups discussions and activities captured in the recommendations is about how the fact that data usage is nuanced. We had lots of discussions that aired concerns about whether it was sensible to count downloads, whether it's sensible to count views, whether doing that was really giving you a good indication of how data was being used because of the multiple ways that people interact with data in this day and age. The recommendations note that this is the case and that there's still work to be done to understand and overcoming these, which leads on to the recommendation that we should continue to be present as a community and keep this discussion alive. So on the next slide, I think I've tried to sort of think about what the benefits are and the sort of opportunities for engagement are as a result of that work. So the recommendations, they provide a view on, oh, sorry, I just get lost my slide view. They provide a view on the steps and recommendations for widespread adoption. I think I came into this group and volunteered as co-chair because I was incredibly skeptical. And I think if there was one personal journey that happened throughout this, it was being persuaded that one of the best things we can do is just try and put in places mechanisms that do count views, downloads, so that we start to build an understanding of what is possible, what the limitations are in a more concrete basis rather than hypothetical. And so one of the encouragements I would make here is to, if people are interested in this, to have a look at the recommendations and the sort of tools that Araksha will be talking about and think about whether they can be implemented. And then I think thinking ahead here, I think at some point it would probably be appropriate to revisit the recommendations and see if they reflect recent developments and current perspectives. And of course, input from IGAD community members would be more than welcome at that particular stage. So I'd encourage you, if you kind of are interested in this particular area, to reach out and let us know. And then just quickly before I hand over to Araksha, I should acknowledge that a lot of the drive for this group came from the other co-chair in the first instance, Daniela Lowenberg, who kind of set it up and kept the momentum going and drafted the recommendations through to what they are today. So I'll hand over to Araksha now to talk about some of the current activities that are relevant to this.
Thank you so much, Ian. And I should acknowledge the fact that I just joined the working group as co-chair, so very much learning as I go as well. But yes, we wanted to take this opportunity to mention a couple of projects that I'm working on that are tightly related to this working group. And as a brief introduction, so I'm Irache Puebla. I joined the DataCite recently as director of the Make Data Count initiative. Ian has already mentioned the initiative. But essentially, we want to develop and support adoption of data metrics so that we can make these meaningful evaluations about how data is being used and reused. So if we can move to the next slide, please. Yes, so as I mentioned, we thought I could give you a brief update on a couple of projects that I'm involved in on the data side, because they are tightly related to trying to provide tools for the community to make it easier to adopt the data usage metrics. So if we move to the next slide, I'll talk about the first project, which is the Global Open Data Citation Corpus. The context for this project is that we know that data sets are being used in many different ways by maybe different communities and groups, but we are not currently able to capture all of that usage. And in fact, there are a number of challenges around this. One is we don't have enough metadata that is exposed to capture that usage, and also the fact that this usage information currently lives in disparate locations. So we have a very fragmented view as to what the data usage that is taking place is. To respond to this challenge, we thought that we should focus on working on a comprehensive corpus that will incorporate data citations from different sources. So essentially try to capture the information that currently lives in different places together and give the community one centralized public resource that they could use for the different uses and needs. So the way that we are working on the corpus is that it will incorporate data citations from a variety of sources. Some of them will be through persistent identifier authorities, such as Crossref and DataCite. But we also want to bring into these data citations that come from other sources who perhaps are, for example, mining full text articles to see where data sets are being mentioned. We know there are many ways of mentioning data sets in articles, etc. But we also know that there are a number of organizations that are doing this type of work and identifying mentions to data sets in the articles. We also know that this is particularly important, for example, in the context of data sets that have accession numbers instead of DOIs, for example. So in order to bring all of this together, we want to incorporate the data citations that come from these different sources and develop the corpus in an iterative way. We are currently working on the prototype. I'll tell you a bit more about this in a second. But then the idea is to continue developing the sources that feed into it through other partnerships with different organizations, develop an MVP, and eventually bring the corpus into production as a resource for the community that will be made available through APIs, also a data dump. And we also want to provide dashboards with visualizations of the citations in the corpus. So that, again, anybody who may be interested mostly in coming to it as a user has those tools as well. So in the next slide, I wanted to mention where we are with the project currently. It's still very early stages. We are working on the prototype. We've actually developed a platform where you can already access the visualizations. This prototype includes a zip file of data citations coming from DataCite event data, and also a file of data citations that Chan Zuckerberg Initiative has provided us after they've been using machine learning to mine through a corpus of full text articles that they have available. So this incorporates those two sources at this stage. The prototype includes some visualizations to allow users to get this very, very initial glimpse into what we hope will be the potential uses of the corpus once we get to production. I provided here an example of how users can filter through the prototype using different facets, including, for example, funder information, repository information, etc. We'll be making the seed file for the prototype available to the community. We are in the final stages of preparing this, but this will be available to the community. And something that I also wanted to mention is that we have an open invitation for anybody who may want to learn more about the corpus, may be interested in contributing citations to it, or perhaps even from a user perspective, provide feedback, because we want to make sure that as we develop the corpus, we take the user needs into account. So if you're interested in learning more, please do get in touch. Next slide, please. The second project I wanted to mention is the usage tracker the data site is building. But to give a little bit of context as to how it came to be, I wanted to refer back to the counter code of practice for research data that Ian mentioned earlier. Essentially, the motivation for the counter code of practice for data was that there was a recognition that we needed to have standards and a framework to normalize data usage across repositories, as Ian was explaining. So through collaboration with Counter, which is a standards of organization that had already been working on frameworks to standardize reporting of use of electronic resources. And for those who may not be familiar with this, this is something that is quite commonly used by librarians, for example, to understand the usage of particular journals and their articles that they can make decisions about subscriptions, etc. So the group who was behind this code of practice for data decided to partner with Counter and leverage their knowledge around the standards for electronic resources and develop the code of practice for data, which was released 5 years ago now. And we think that this is very important in terms of normalizing usage and being able to compare apples to apples in terms of how data are being used. But what we have seen is that there's been a few challenges for adoption. The main one I would say is the fact that it's quite time and resource consuming to implement the code of practice, requires developer understanding of the intricacies of the code, and also quite a bit of code to maintain to develop the reports that feed into this. So to respond to this, in the next slide, I wanted to again mention a little bit this other project that DataSite is working on, which is to develop this usage tracker. The idea is to say we have heard that the community has an interest in having this normalized usage information, but it takes quite a bit of resources, so we want to make this simpler to implement. And that's the motivation for this tracker, essentially to provide a tool that repositories can implement that will allow reporting through web-based usage. So the benefits is that through this tool, there is very little knowledge of the counter code of practice required, and very little code required as well. Essentially, the tracker works through a JavaScript tracker that will collect repository usage stats directly and feed them into DataSite, and then DataSite will generate the monthly reports for the repositories. This is a snippet to facilitate the collection of this information. It's still at very early stages, it's in beta release, but again, if we are very interested in hearing from repositories who may be interested in starting to explore this and also give us feedback on it. So you have the details on our documentation from DataSite there, and the contact details if you would like to try it or learn more about it. And I think that's all we have. Thank you.
Thanks very much. That was a lot of great information, and I am really thrilled to see how far all of this work has come. I remember from 5 years ago thinking that it was definitely going to be valuable, and it's great to see that it's gotten to this point, because now it's much more easy to implement, and I appreciate that. All right, so we will now move to hear from Kirsten Leonard, and she is here to talk primarily about physical samples and collections, and maybe a little bit about domain repositories, if we get a chance to ask her about that. I am going to switch to her slides. So welcome, Kirsten, and give me one moment while I share my other screen.
Yeah, sorry that I didn't manage to get the slides attached to.
That's okay. I think I have the right, should be seeing my screen. Let me get the slides running.
Yes, I do.
Okay, there we go.
So yeah, I'm definitely not going to have as much organized and structured information as was provided by the last two speakers, but I just wanted to give a brief update on what these two interest groups are doing that I've been involved with. A brief introduction from my side. I'm Kirsten Nenad, and I'm operating domain repositories that focus on data acquired on physical samples. So that's the reason why I'm engaged with these two groups. The first one being the RDA interest group on physical samples and collections in the research data ecosystem. And this is a group that started in 2017, bringing a bit more attention to physical samples and their relevance in management of research data. We have focused on making sample data reproducible, reusable. Obviously, since the beginning of this interest group, the word has changed substantially, and we're now talking a lot about fair samples. But what this group has really tried to do is create a cross-disciplinary dialogue about sample data management, the samples themselves, with aspects of persistent identifiers for samples, metadata and vocabularies that describe samples, the operation and sustainability of sample registries and catalogs. And there is a lot around policies and practices of sample collection, sample sharing, and sample preservation. And I have to say that over these now 7 years or 6 years that the group has existed, there has been such a growth in the interest of physical samples, their unique identification, metadata profiles, and so on, many of which are very domain specific, earth sciences, biology specifically as well. But there are quite a number now of cross-disciplinary activities going on. One being, for example, the Research Coordination Network, Sampling Nature, or the Internet of Samples project. So I thought it was worth actually participating in this session to engage more of the agricultural community in these activities. I know that at past meetings of the interest group, we have had representation from that community there. I remember the seed bank and soil databases that work with it, but you know, it's a call for participation, specifically as we have lost one of our co-chairs, Esther Plump, and the other 3 co-chairs have been on for quite a while, and we'd love to see some new blood, new ideas in this group. Could you get to the next slide? So mainly I've already summarized the objectives. I think what we have done over the years is really trying to be a forum for dialogue, for exchange, updating everybody, and showing what exists actually in different domains or in cross-domain activities, what systems are there for sample registrations, what solutions are being worked in, and on a more generic level, really talking about how do we link the physical samples properly with digital research data and publications. What do we need to do in order to get implementation really going? And I think a lot has happened there. We've And the RDA obviously is always the right place to facilitate international cooperation here. And that has been taken up in other organizations or efforts such as the International Generic Sample Number or in efforts such as this Research Coordination Network that I mentioned before. I think that's basically what I had. I wanted to just point to the next, the upcoming meeting. You can skip that. I think I've basically talked about that. So one of the outputs or the main output actually that has come from the interest group is a summary of best practices under 23 things physical samples that you can download from the RDA website. It talks about all the important aspects of physical samples in the digital world of research data, including persistent identifiers, metadata, citation of samples, which is, just thinking about the previous presentation, there is a lot of focus right now in how to cite physical samples, how to give credit for them, and track the reuse. I'm actually just came back this morning with a red-eye flight from Oakland, where we had a 2-day workshop on physical samples again, and how to attribute the whole process of collection and curation to the actors in this ecosystem. Okay, the next slide this is the switch over to the interest group on domain repositories. It's quite a bit older, but since about 2018, I've been the only chair of this group, and it has limped along, so to say, because a lot of what was discussed in this group, kind of an exchange among different domain-specific repositories and their specific challenges, solutions. So a lot of concerns had always been brought up about the streamlined operations, sustainability. There are quite a number of topics that were brought up in the early years, but there has been a trend in the RDA to have more domain-specific interest groups, and the discussion has moved, I think, a lot into those domain-specific communities. What I'm still doing is partnering with other interest groups in RDA to run sessions where we're trying to bring in the domain-specific perspective. So, for example, there have been a number of sessions that were co-chaired with the platforms for data repositories. What do domain-specific repositories need? What are, their constraints and limitations in adopting large platforms and so on? Many of the domain-specific repositories are quite limited with respect to their funding, so that plays another big role in this. And I'm wondering really what exists in the world of agriculture data that is very domain specific, and could maybe, a discussion here could reinvigorate this interest group. I think there's one more slide. Which is a session in the upcoming meeting in October in Austria, where we are running a session again together with the repository platforms for research data. And that links up to the previous presentation about, data usage and impact and tracking this, specifically focusing on data that have never been published. So we have a number of speakers here who are bringing in domain-specific perspectives. I think that's it, Cynthia. Thank you for the opportunity to bring a little bit of attention to these two groups.
Yeah, thank you, Kirsten. This actually illustrates exactly why we wanted to have this session. It sounds like everything here is very relevant to our agricultural community. I can tell you that physical samples came up in a recent discussion about long-term agroecosystem research, and I raised the question, are you looking at these physical sample standards? And they said, yes, they are. This was this was a discussion between USDA and Richard Osler from the GL10 group that's doing long-term experiments, and so agriculture is involved in those areas and needs to be part of these data landscapes. Similarly, with domain repositories, I will say that I used to run the Ag Data Commons, which we thought of as a generalist repository, but it is limited to agricultural data. So it sort of depends on, where do you draw the line between what is truly a very specific domain versus a more general thing. But I agree with you. It's hard to sustain these. The more that people can talk to each other, but at the same time, what we always say at the Ag Data Commons is that people should put their data in the most relevant domain repository because they're going to have the best support for the metadata that
clearly
researchers
have,
actually need, and curation expertise as well. So they're really vital parts of the ecosystem. And that said, communication across the entire landscape is only going to make things better. So thanks for this, and it's great to see that you're having this session at RDA Plenary 21, and I will do my best to get the word out to our colleagues to attend that.
And I think Ian is still on. It's actually, I just wanted to mention that during that week, there is also going to be a session that focuses on samples, and I need to quickly look up the title. It's describing chemical, physical, and biological samples digitally. It's organized by Leah McEwen from the chemistry group, I think.
Sorry,
so
yeah. It came out. I mean, it's sort of the things that shows the power of RDA, because we ran a interest group session, chemistry research data interest groups session at the last plenary, and one of the messages that came out of that across a number of initiatives, chemistry ones and adjacent ones, was what Kirsten said, this increasing attention being drawn to samples and understanding that when you've got a data set, you really need to be able to relate it to the physical sample, otherwise you kind of don't really have that great sense of context that allows you to understand whether it's relevant or reusable.
And I have to say that really agriculture is a really interesting field, because it is quite, I mean, a number of different domains coming together, that the overlap of biology and earth surface and geobiology,
hydrology and economics
and
as well.
economies.
So,
absolutely. Really interesting case.
Constantly trying to do is connect each of those disciplines, but they're also multidisciplinary. They really have use cases that can bring all of these things together. So okay, well, with that, thanks for the wonderful discussion. I'm going to turn now to Shelley Stahl, who has joined us after all, and we do have some slides, so give me a moment while I change my screen sharing back to this one. And welcome to Shelley for joining us. And let me get this actually launched. There we go.
Thank you, Cindy.
Okay.
And if I caused any confusion earlier, so I'm going to be talking to you about two different groups at RDA and maybe promoting one more. The ESIP RDA Earth, Space, and Environmental Sciences Interest Group has been around for several years now. And I think Kirsten actually used to be a co-chair. So, thank you very much. And really fantastic to see the conversations around discipline repositories. Kirsten's presentation, really important, especially for the push around the world for fair data, making sure data is well documented, we really do need to focus on our discipline repositories. And in fact, that's what we're going to do in the upcoming breakout session at IDW, so Plenary 21 for RDA. And what I just want to share with you a little bit more about how this particular interest group works and the kind of things we present on at each of the plenaries. My co-chairs are Helen Glaves. She's from the British Geological Society and just recently stepped back from being president of the EGU. She's now vice president. Danny Kincaid, who's at BICO-DEMO in Woods Hole, the Biological Chemical Oceanography Data Management Office. She leads that along with Adam Shepard. And she's also the president of AGU's informatics section and active there. Pedro Carrera works at the University of Sao Paulo and is very forward-moving and progressive when it comes to making sure that the data that is prepared and necessary. He teaches data science, artificial intelligence, and another of other topics at the University of Sao Paulo. And of course, Leslie Wyborn, who is a sage for all of us in Australia, who the Australian National University, as well as a number of other organizations that she supports in her semi-retirement. Not really. So this particular group will be presenting at IDW in Breakout 1. If you could go to the next slide, I think this is just a couple notes on our agenda. We have a rolling topic that goes to each session where we check in with everyone. One of the reasons this particular interest group came together, we were seeing that there were common activities happening in different regions or countries. And we felt there was an opportunity to introduce people to each other, introduce those projects, and provide an opportunity for collaboration. So in the data infrastructure catalog, these are the groups that are taking part in these types of activities. And we are also incredibly concerned about the semantic resources. It's very hard to identify fair vocabulary, fair ontologies, and it's very hard to identify them at all, fair or not. So we've started to collect those. And in one of our meetings, there was a keen interest from folks from the agricultural community to compare notes on what vocabularies are being used. So that's an opportunity for potential partnership in the future. For the upcoming IDW P21, we are going to do a deep dive on domain repositories for the Earth space, and we include you all for the environmental side of agriculture. So feel free to consider yourselves as a complementary or part of the family, or whatever makes you comfortable saying. We would love to have you there. Some of the current concerns, Kirsten mentioned many of them. If we can talk about these concerns as an interest group and lift them up in a way that can help inform policy, help inform communities such as institutions or the publishing community, journals, our editors, or any of the other potential stakeholders, to drive or encourage researchers to use domain repositories as much as possible, that would be significant. We have some numbers that we're going to share from AG's publications on where the data sets are going. The data is very hard to collect, so there's some of you are experts in this area, maybe all of you. We use some proxy numbers that we'll be happy to share and explain to you how we came up with the numbers. Many data sets are going to generalist repositories. That's a problem. Some, it's fine. Some shouldn't be there. And this is where we need to help inform our community. So we invite you to come. We've had a number of topics in the past, and going forward, it'd be great to partner with IGAD. So I'm also going to talk to you about a shared issue. We call this the Complex Citation Working Group. And we stood it up because we specifically Deb Agarwal, who now retired, but from the FluxNet Ameriflux, so tracking carbon and other using other instruments as well across the FluxNet. And her challenge had been for some time, how do you give credit to the folks that are managing the instruments, managing the data, and the bodies of observational data that are coming in? She explored dynamic data sets, she explored other opportunities, and some of the next slides are going to walk you through what that thinking is and why this working group was necessary, that it really was different than what had been addressed previously. So we're going to be at breakout 3 for IDW, Plenary 21, and particularly we've made a lot of progress and now heading into a demonstration prototype. So let me tell you what we're doing. So go ahead for the next slide, please. So the challenge with data sets. So imagine an environmental work and agricultural work, earth and space, very similar. Depending on your research, you might be touching many data sets, and wanting to do the right thing, you want to go ahead and cite those in the references. And publishers in general, including AGU, are uncomfortable and will actually block you from doing that. If you're above even 40 or 50 citations in your reference section that are specific to data or software, or frankly, physical samples, we're going to push that body of knowledge to the supplementary information where it is no longer machine actionable. And this is really an issue. If we want our data sets to be linked to publications and properly cited, they really need to be included in the reference section, no matter how many there are. Some of our use cases that we're gathering, in this case, it was digital images, that it would be 1,000 or more. And those were the ones that were used for the research and needed to be cited. So what Deb was trying to do is figure out a way to come at this. And she brought this issue up at an AGU town hall a few years ago. And we concurred, yes, this is an issue. Many of these resources aren't at one repository. They're actually at different repositories. So that already erases many of the solutions that are, or makes them unfeasible. Not erases them, I apologize. Those solutions are useful for many reasons, but for this particular reason, they're not feasible to solve the problem. And then figuring out the usage licenses is very challenging. And then how do you actually guide your authors when they're trying to publish? And I've already addressed the supplementary information with you. And it's, how do you, combining citations? I mean, it's not the right way to approach it. Next slide, please. So when she was trying to solve the problem, she had, looking at her own FluxNet, and in 2015, her constituents were trying to figure out how to actually get credit for the data they were collecting at each of the towers. So how would you create a collection? How would you cite it? So this would be specific to a DOI collection. DataCite has a way to do that, but there's no way to get credit. That was the main con, that tracing those credits, tracing the actual data sets, the full authorship, and no way to actually include them, and incredibly difficult on reusability, as you can see here. And then the dynamic data citation, also the authors are not getting credit, and you can read the rest of these as well. So the work proceeded pretty scrappily. We gathered our friends and we started to meet and gather use cases, not yet at RDA. It was very clear that there was a need and the use cases started to come. So we now have about 10, including physical samples, to include within with it as a possible type of thing that would be inside this complex collection. Go ahead on to the next slide, please. So the journey for Deb, she felt that the only way to actually get appropriate credit was to write a data paper in a prestigious journal. and then what it took to actually implement that was incredibly difficult. Not all of the contributors could be included. It was just the PIs. Very hard to update. And it was a high-level citation. It wasn't the specific data set used for a particular research. So there were a number of issues, and I'll let you read the rest of these. Go ahead on to the next citation, the next slide. There we go. So the paper, she did get the paper published. So there it is. Yay. They have had a number of citations, and it does go into we're using a data paper for the purpose of connecting the data set to publication is actually not optimal. So then we kicked off complex citations. I'm trying. Go ahead to the next slide. I'm trying to remember what it is. The use cases. Okay, I'll talk to you about how we went forward. So in the Scrappy group, we had enough content that we felt it was time to engage with all of the international community and offer the opportunity to include additional use cases. So for the Earth and Space Sciences, the IPCC report, Martina Stockhouse, you notice that she was also a co-chair. She needs this to connect the climate change reports or the IPCC reports that are being generated all the way down to the data that's being created. And this is now a necessity within these mechanisms that are continuing year after year. So that alone was the only thing I needed to be very excited about working on this and solving the issue and connecting the groups together. And we had a number of use cases coming out of oceanographic. Leslie Wyborn brought a number of use cases, including the physical samples. So the word collection, the word crate, RO crate, some of you are familiar with, and Carol Goebel is part of this group along with her team. These are they already have definitions. And so we wanted to try to create something that was useful without being caught in a word problem. So we created this, we are using this humorous word, please consider it humorous, a reliquary, where precious things are located. I at the last RDA, I actually heard somebody else use the word who wasn't participating in our group, and I got really excited. So no, we don't mean for that to go forward, but it is a way for us to define the thing we need without being bogged down in the impressions or usage of the word by others. And so it might end up being aligned to something that already exists, but we are moving forward. So what we have are the repository folks. So thank you, all of you. And if you have this same challenge where people are trying to cite your data in papers and it's the citations are just challenged, this might be a place for you to come and participate, specifically if there's many data sets from your repository being used or in combination with other repositories. The indexers, they're key. That's the mechanism that supports how people determine credit and the value of a data set, that they enable that mechanism to happen. Credit is a very difficult word. It's a perception. There's no definition on what credit means. And it depends on how your institution sees data sets. It depends on how your funder sees data sets, you're the society you belong to. So we are enabling that ability by making sure more than 40 digital objects that are supporting research, so data, software, physical samples, or images or more, can be included all the way through the publication process to receiving automated attribution on the other side. I think this is my last slide. If you want to try to go forward and see if I popped something else in here. Yes. Okay, great. So you are welcome to come. We do have on the RDA website links to all of our previous efforts. You can see all of the use cases we've gathered. If you have a use case, please reach out to me. We want it included. We want this to work for you. And so think about it as a collection or a group or a reliquary of the citations such that there is each child citation within this reliquary is given the automated attribution correctly. So thank you.
Thank you, Shelley. And I can already tell you that I have thought of 3 relevant use cases from the agricultural domain that fit very nicely into this and are overlapping with other domains as well. So I think, again, it's just exciting to see that there is a recognition of these problems and good people with lots of expertise helping to solve them. And I think this has been a really fantastic preview of the kinds of discussions that go on at a Research Data Alliance meeting, and a real teaser actually that tells me which sessions I want to attend. So I want to end today with just a plug for the meeting that's being held in Austria, but it is hybrid. So if you can't travel, you can still register. It is later in October. Registration will be open until October 20th. One of the reasons I pushed to have this webinar now is because I wanted to give people plenty of time to either arrange travel or decide that they were able to attend virtually. So thanks again to all of our speakers. I think this was actually a even more coherent set of presentations than I expected, because obviously we're all working on different pieces of very similar challenges and need to be talking to each other. And so we will be posting this recording on the website for IGAD and promoting it to our community members. And hopefully we'll see some of them joining you at the next RDA meeting or at any other venue where you're working on these really exciting topics. And I'll just ask Valeria, she's come on screen. Do you have any other final words for us? Valeria is one of my co-chairs for IGAD.
No, thank you, Cynthia. I was thinking the same thing, that it came out as a really coherent set of presentations, actually, and super interesting. And we will give your contacts to everybody in the community, definitely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you again for your participation, and we'll see you when we see you. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.